What's going on, everybody? We're going to get started here in just a minute. Give a minute for folks to get in. Usually, once the stream goes live, there's a notification that goes out, and within a couple minutes, folks start joining. So, just a few things up front, as with the day 1 and day 2 battles. Live streams, which once we're done with this stream, I'm going to put them all into a playlist, and I'll put links in the description. So, if you're watching this on the July 3rd one, I'll put links in the description after the stream to days 1 and 2, so you can go back and watch those. And as always, and I know some folks have already mentioned this, thank you, Random German Guy, one of our mods who mentioned that for you guys already. Just as always, remember to please keep your questions and the conversation as much focused on our topic as possible. So don't plan on me answering questions that don't relate to that for the most part. We're going to talk about the July 3rd battle and then the aftermath of Gettysburg today. And yeah, you'll notice there's a lot of great Gettysburg content on YouTube right now because it is the anniversary, the 158th anniversary of the battle. So my friend JD over at History Underground has had this long-running fantastic series from his visit to Gettysburg. And I know Armchair Historian had one that just went up, others as well. Adam watching in Edinburgh, very cool. Hope you're doing well in Scotland. Arizona, very cool. Alberta, Canada. So I wish we had the same tool we used yesterday for the July 2nd battle. I wish we had such a tool for July 3rd, and eventually there will be. Maybe by next July 3rd, they'll have that. I know they're about to release the July 1st animated battle map, but they don't have one for July 3rd yet. When they do, it's going to be a fantastic resource to be able to use. But for now, we've got to use some different resources to talk about July 3rd. So obviously, when talking about July 3rd, everybody thinks of Pickett's Charge. But there's a whole lot more to the Battle of Gettysburg on July 3rd than just Pickett's Charge. In fact, there had been a fight going on for 7 hours before Pickett's Charge was really even starting to move into motion over at Culp's Hill. So we're going to talk about that. Nicholas, to my knowledge, I don't know of any other battle that has such a resource like that map that we looked at. York, PA, very cool. You're right down the road from Gettysburg. So July 3rd, a couple of misconceptions. First of all, as I mentioned a minute ago, there's a lot more to the fighting on July 3rd. There's the fight at Culp's Hill that starts early in the morning, like even before dawn. There are 2 separate cavalry battles that happen on either end of the battlefield. One to the east of the battlefield, one to the south of the battlefield. So they'd be kind of on the extreme right of the Union and on the extreme left of the Union line. There's also some fighting that goes on up around pretty close to the rear of what would become Pickett's Charge, up in this area near where the visitor center is now. And this is where the hook kind of comes around. So all of that is to say that Pickett's Charge was not the only main event of July 3rd. It also was not Lee's original plan for July 3rd, and that's also something people don't really know about. Gettysburg is in the extreme south-central part of Pennsylvania. It's very close to the Maryland border. It's just a couple miles away from Maryland. In fact, if I zoom out here, you'll see how close Maryland is. Here's the line right here. And you can see there a mile. So, I don't know, 7-8 miles from the center of Gettysburg to the Maryland border right there. So, yeah, Lee's original plan was not an attack on the center. His original plan was to do the exact same thing he planned on doing on July 2nd, which was an attack on either wing of the Union Army. His men were still in position to do that. And let me see if I can find a map that kind of shows where things are at that point. I don't know if I have a map for that. But yeah, July 3rd. So his men on the right under Longstreet are still right there real close to where they have been fighting. Ewell's 2nd Corps is still very close over here on the Confederate left. But they don't end up following through on that. And that's in large part to what happens early on July 3rd. So there's about a 7-hour battle that takes place at Culp's Hill. Now, just to give you some perspective about Culp's Hill. Culp's Hill is super close to the Union center. In fact, if we zoom in here to the map here, the Union center is right in this area right here. This is the area that was going to be attacked by. Here's the angle. So this is kind of the line right here. Okay, this is the area where the Union is defending. They're kind of behind a stone wall right in here. That's the point that the attack is centered on. Now, if you go just not even a mile to the east of there, you've got Culp's Hill, and you've got this battle. There's Spangler Spring, there's Culp's Hill, and there's fighting that goes for about 7 hours over here on the Union right, and that's the map we're looking at right... Oh, where's it at? Right here. You can see, here's the Baltimore Pike right here. This is how close the Confederates are to that area. It's not far at all. In fact, let me kind of go this way. Thank you, A1 Mighty Laser. I actually saw that Armchair Historian's video was up. I don't know if I'll respond or do a reaction to that one or not, just because I've been doing Gettysburg content already, but down the road at some point. So here is the Baltimore Pike, here's Spangler Spring, here's Culp's Hill. So that gives you a little bit of perspective. This is less than a mile from where Pickett's charge is going to attack. And so this goes on for about 7 hours. And so Lee's plan is to attack here, and it's for Longstreet to renew the attack on the right, including his one fresh division, which is Pickett. Pickett's division is the only division of infantry that has not fought to this point in the battle for the Confederates. Highest ranking Union soldier at Gettysburg would be George Meade. He was in command of the Army of the Potomac. By this point, I can't say exactly how many they had, but going into the battle, 90,000 on the Confederate side, roughly 70,000 on the, or 90,000 on the Union side, roughly 70,000 on the Confederate side. Yeah, Avatar, I don't think it was nearly that high for the Union, more like 90 to 92, 93,000 for the Union. So, because the attack goes on for 7 hours here at Culp's Hill and does not achieve any success, more than anywhere else, the Union is really dug in strong here. They've got strong defensive works. They've got a lot of guns to help them out in this area, and it's a difficult place. And so Ewell's attacking with Johnson's division and doesn't have a lot of success. And this is where you have Maryland units fighting on both sides up against each other. You've got the 1st Maryland Battalion here on the Confederate side, the 1st Maryland Potomac Home Brigade on the Union side, and they're kind of going toe-to-toe right here in this area just to the northwest of Spangler Spring. They call this Culp's Hill. It's named after a family that originally was Kolb, K-O-L-B. And like many German names, it got anglicized. It became Culp. And the reason I know so much about that is my wife is descended from the Kolbs. Christopher Kolb, who was a Revolutionary War ancestor of my wife's, came from Adams County, Pennsylvania to Northeast Ohio, where we live now. And so the people who owned Culp's Hill were cousins of his. And Wesley Culp was in the Stonewall Brigade in the Confederate Army. He grew up on Culp's Hill. A few years before the war started, he moved to Virginia, and when the war breaks out, he enlists in the Confederate Army. He had a brother who was an officer in the Union Army in a Pennsylvania regiment. And Wesley Culp ends up being killed on Culp's Hill, probably July 2nd into July 3rd at some point, and he's buried in an unknown grave somewhere, probably down in Hollywood Cemetery in Richmond. Two of his best friends were a guy named Jack Skelly, who was in the Union Army, and a girl named Jenny Wade. All three of them die within a couple of weeks of each other. Jack Skelly was mortally wounded down in Winchester. Some people say he was actually engaged to Jenny Wade. And Wesley Culp actually, because he was in the Stonewall Brigade, actually was there and actually met with Jack Skelly as he lay dying. And Jack Skelly gave Wesley Culp some letters to give to Jenny Wade if he ever had the chance to see her. And of course, Jack dies a few weeks after the Battle of Gettysburg. Wesley is killed on Culp's Hill, and Jenny Wade will be very tragically killed in town, the only civilian casualty during the battle, when a bullet goes through two doors and hits her and kills her while she's baking bread for Union soldiers. So all three of these friends end up dying. Nebulous, you're at the bloody angle right now. I need to go. I have not been to Gettysburg during the anniversary. I'd very much like to be there at some point. All right, so anyway, so this a lot of fighting goes on here. This changes up Lee's plan. When he realizes he's not going to be able to break the Union right, he decides not to launch another attack on the Union left, down around Little Round Top, Wheatfield, Devil's Den, that area. So he goes then to his other plan, which is the one everybody remembers, which is that he's going to take Longstreet's 1 fresh division under Pickett, along with 2 divisions from the 3rd Corps, which is something people don't remember about this. We call it Pickett's Charge, but if you go to Gettysburg, most of the signs actually say Longstreet's Assault, because Longstreet was put in command of it, but actually 2/3 of the divisions were from A.P. Hill's Corps, and Longstreet kind of argued with Lee. He's like, shouldn't Hill be in charge of this? Most of the men are from his corps, not mine. And so it's Dorsey Pender's division, which has been put under Isaac Trimble because Pender's been wounded. And then Pettigrew is actually in charge of Heath's division, I believe. So these are divisions that were just shredded on the first day of the battle. And now they're being asked to go into this fight as well, including the 26th North Carolina that had already lost 75% of their men. They participate in Pickett's Charge. Could you even imagine that? Men who have already suffered ridiculously high casualties are going to make this suicidal charge over open ground. It's just crazy. There's no California regiments at Gettysburg, I can tell you that. It is possible Wesley Culp's family buried him, but I would think if they had, they would have marked his grave. So I don't know. It certainly is possible. There was a British officer with the Confederacy who was there as an observer. His name was Arthur Freemantle. And that was a pretty common thing. You had a lot of American observers during the Franco-Prussian War, for example, that were watching. It's a common thing to send officers to observe, especially because you want to get reports and find out what's going on firsthand and things like that. Was Pickett's Charge entirely necessary? No. I mean, in hindsight, obviously, we all know it was a bad idea. So the plan is to have Pickett, Trimble, and Pettigrew attack with 3 divisions at the center. George Meade, the commander of the Union Army, has correctly guessed that that's what's going to happen. He figures, okay, Lee has attacked my left, he's attacked my right, he hasn't had any success, he's going to go after the middle next. Now you can see here how things are arrayed, and you'll notice one conspicuous absence. There are 7 infantry corps in the Union Army, but you only see 6 of them here. And I'll explain why in a second. Sedgwick's 6th Corps has been moved down to the left to kind of bolster the line. They're the one corps out of the 7 that really isn't that involved in the Battle of Gettysburg. They're mainly a reserve, so they suffered very few casualties. Sykes with the 5th Corps is right here. David Birney is now in command of the 3rd Corps, which is holding this area right here. Hancock is in command of the 2nd Corps. Howard's 11th Corps is up on Cemetery Hill, and Slocum with the 12th Corps over here on the right. You don't see the 1st Corps, and that's because the 1st Corps, for the most part at this point, has ceased to exist as a unit because they suffered so many casualties. The most northern battle is Schrute Farms, not Gettysburg. It's actually not Gettysburg either, and let me tell you where it is. And I know this because I'm there every week. The church, some of you know that I pastor a church on Sundays, and the church that I pastor is down here in this town called Salineville. The northernmost battle between organized units of the Union and Confederate armies takes place just southwest of Salineville, Ohio. It's right in this area right here. And I'm planning on doing a video on that. I'm going to take my drone down there. I've been doing research to do it. And you'll probably see that sometime this summer. It takes place right here. So let me zoom out. So you're looking kind of west of Pittsburgh, right in this area. And it was John Hunt Morgan's Confederate raid. After the Battle of Salineville, he retreats to the north, and he surrenders right here, near a place called West Point. So this is the surrender site right here where John Hunt Morgan surrenders. That is the northernmost battle of the Civil War. It's significantly north of Gettysburg. So you look at the line here. Gettysburg's down here. Okay, so let's go back to this now. So that's the plan. Octaviano, I'm going to help you with that one. It's not called the California Regiment because most of the men are from California. It's called the California Regiment because most of the men are from California, Pennsylvania. California, Pennsylvania is outside of Pittsburgh. It's right here. There's a California, Pennsylvania right here. There's a California University of Pennsylvania. And then there's also an Indiana, Pennsylvania. It's where my wife's grandfather was born in Indiana, Pennsylvania. That's why you have a California regiment. It has nothing to do with the state of California. No, Trench, Abraham Lincoln, not a stupid question. That's how you learn. Where's D.C. in relation to this? D.C. is about, in terms of driving, it's about an hour south. It's about, 70, 80 miles south of Gettysburg. But Gettysburg's right here. The Antietam battlefield's right over here. And then Washington's right here. Manassas, the Bull Run battlefields are right in here. No, trench warfare was not really a thing until... I shouldn't say it wasn't a thing at this time, because while Gettysburg is going on, there is the siege of Vicksburg going on, and there are a lot of trenches there. And trench warfare, existed long before that. There were trench warfare during the American Revolution, and even long before that in Europe. Why did civilians go out and watch the battles? The first battle of Bull Run takes place 25 miles outside of Washington, D.C., and everybody thought it would be the one big battle of the war, so they grabbed their picnic baskets and went out to watch the battle. Rockwell, we're not talking about Greeks and Romans today. We're talking about Gettysburg. Yeah, so Lee starts out, okay, so let's talk about the map here for a second. So the Union is right along this road right here. Right in here is the center of the Union line. The Confederates are over here where the North Carolina, Virginia monuments are. This is Seminary Ridge right here. And so this is where Lee's men are, and he's got a lot of them behind this ridge. Seminary Ridge is a pretty significant rise in elevation right there, so a lot of them are behind the ridge. So they bring out their artillery, something like 150 to 175 artillery pieces right out here. So they're about a mile away from the Union lines, and they start shelling the Union position. Well, unfortunately for the Confederates, most of the artillery shells overshoot the position and land actually back here around where, I think this is Meade's headquarters right here. I could be looking at the wrong building, but I'm pretty sure that's Meade's headquarters was right there. And so most of the artillery shells overshoot the Union position and land behind. And all of the men lay down. And it's during that artillery barrage, and about 80 artillery pieces on the Union side start returning fire. So there's about 250 artillery pieces that are firing back and forth for about an hour or so. And so the Union, a lot of the men lay down, and this is where Winfield Scott Hancock, who's the commander of the 2nd Corps, you can imagine all the men are lying down. The shells are shooting overhead. The last thing you want to do is be on a horse up much higher during all of this. But that's what Hancock does. And he rides around on his horse. And he's trying to inspire the men. This is really the only thing he can do at this point. He's trying to inspire them. He knows that this shelling is preceding an attack, because you're not going to do that much shelling unless you're planning to attack next. And there's this famous quote, and it's one of my favorite quotes from the third day, or from the battle as a whole, when one of his aides comes up, and I think in the movie Gettysburg, the aide is played by Ken Burns, the guy who does the famous documentary on the Civil War. And he comes up and he says, "General, please get down from your horse." And Hancock very famously says, "There are times when a corps commander's life does not count." And he, of course, would be severely wounded later in the battle. A bullet hits his saddle, and it drives a nail from the saddle. It wasn't the bullet itself, but it was a nail from the saddle that gets driven into his hip. And it was a pretty severe wound, and he nearly bled to death from it. So, yeah, I am in super history mode right now, yes. There were a mix, Frail. Every type of artillery you can imagine. There were howitzers. There were rifled artillery pieces. Much more rifled artillery on the Union side than there was on the Confederate side. But there was kind of a mix of all of those things. Do I think Lee was a better general than Grant? I think Lee was a better tactician than Grant. So on a single battlefield, yes. I think Grant was a better strategist than Lee. Yeah, Avatar, I agree. I don't think that Gettysburg changes the outcome of the war. I think Vicksburg had a lot more to do with that than Gettysburg did. When was the mini ball introduced? In the 1850s, so before the Civil War. Have I seen any of the American Battlefield Trust videos for this year? Yes, I've been watching a lot of them. My friend JD from the History Underground was there and filmed a few of those with them. I'm a little jealous of him for doing that. And told him next time to drag me along because Gettysburg's kind of my field of expertise. And then JD told me he was worried that I was going to hate his videos from Gettysburg because I know so much about the battle. And I said, on the contrary, it's been awesome seeing his perspective, and seeing the guys from American Battlefield Trust has been awesome as well. Getting to see their excitement for a place that means so much to me personally. How long have I studied the Civil War? Since I was 8 years old. So I'll be 44 in a couple weeks. So do the math. 35, 36 years. It is wrong that Grant just threw his men at the enemy. Yeah, I disagree with that idea of Grant as the butcher. I don't know if it could be heard from Washington, D.C., but they definitely could hear it in Harrisburg, which is the capital of Pennsylvania, which is up here about 35 miles away. So then Lee's plan then is to send these divisions, and it's going to be Pettigrew and Trimble, Pettigrew in the center, Trimble on the left, Pickett on the right. And Longstreet wants no part of this attack. And another famous quote that people talk a lot about, and whether it really happened or not, but Longstreet in his memoirs says that it did. That he basically said, General Lee, I've commanded men at every level, from a squad all the way up to a corps. And it is my opinion that no 15,000 men ever arrayed for battle could take that position. And Lee tells him to do it anyway. And so when Pickett comes to Longstreet at the end of the cannon barrage, because the artillery commander, Alexander, tells him, for God's sake, start your attack or we can't support you with artillery, because they were critically low on artillery shells at this point. Did not have a lot left. They had just enough to help support the attack a little bit. And so when Pickett comes to Longstreet and he says, shall we start the attack? Longstreet can't even bring himself to say yes. He just nods. And Pickett goes out to lead the attack. Salt Squid, I think, why did Lee not retreat after day 2? I forget the exact phrase that you use for this, but it's the sunk cost fallacy. We've put so much into this now, we've got to see it through. He was desperate to end the war because he knew the Confederacy was, he knew Vicksburg was about to fall. He knew they were starting to run out of manpower, supplies. He knew that they couldn't sustain this war much longer before the Union resources would overwhelm them. There's a scene near the beginning of the movie Gettysburg, and again, we don't know if it was really said or not, but it's a conversation between Lee and Longstreet where Lee says something to the effect, he said, "We are adrift in a sea of blood, and I want this to end. I want this to be the final battle." He wanted it to be done with. And I think that's what it was. He was desperate to do anything to put an end to the war and to win it before it was too late. So that's why. So they launched the attack after this artillery barrage. The artillery barrage does very little to the Union lines. Many of these men in the Second Corps that are defending the Union center had been involved in the previous day's fighting. You've got some of the First Corps men down here. Stannard has what I guess it's known as the Paper Collar Brigade, the Vermont troops that had not really seen any combat before the Battle of Gettysburg. But some of these men had already been involved the previous day's fighting, but most of them had not. Was Gettysburg the biggest battle of the Civil War? Depends on how you define biggest. It was the bloodiest battle. It was the most casualties. It's the most famous battle of the war. But in terms of the number of men who fought, no, it's not. It's like fourth biggest in the Civil War in terms of the number of men who fought. How accurate is the movie Gettysburg? Pretty accurate. I can't think of any ridiculously bad errors. I think the only things you could really dispute in the movie Gettysburg are questions of interpretation, where we don't really know for sure what was said or how a decision was made, things like that. But by and large, all of the events are pretty accurate. I talked about the 20th Maine bayonet charge yesterday because that was July 2nd. So that was on the stream yesterday. Yeah, Fredericksburg was the biggest in terms of number of men involved. Yeah, Squid. Why are you still asking that question? I just answered it. No, there weren't any African-American regiments at Gettysburg. The first black regiments were just starting to enter service in 1863. So really the first major battle in the Army of the Potomac that involved black troops would be 1864, I think, at Petersburg. One of Lincoln's brothers-in-law, Todd, is wounded and captured during Pickett's charge. Yeah, a number of Lincoln's brothers-in-law were in the Confederate Army. So right about the time, it's about 2 weeks after the Battle of Gettysburg, that the 54th Massachusetts is fighting in that famous battle at Fort Wagner that you see in the movie Glory. So that's happening the same month that the Battle of Gettysburg does, just down in South Carolina. So the attack commences, and so there's a couple of things that happen. They're marching shoulder to shoulder, 15,000 men across. It's about a mile wide front, attacking maybe 8,000 Union soldiers that are defending this position. We talked about Devil's Den yesterday. That was in July 2nd as well. So they start marching across. First, they think they've knocked the Union artillery out, so they're not expecting to come under a lot of artillery fire. But the Union starts opening up with long-range artillery, so that's the first thing they face. About the time, and let's take a look here. About the time they get about to the halfway mark, they come up along right here, along where the Emmitsburg Road is. There are some fences in here that they've got to cross, and about the time they hit those fences is when they're going to start coming into range of small arms fire. You figure at maximum effective range, you're talking 300 to 400 yards, or about a quarter mile for rifled muskets. So you're looking at right around the Emmitsburg Road, where they can start opening up with their rifled muskets from right here. So as they're crossing these fences, and they're getting slowed down by those fences, they're starting to come under that fire. Then as they get closer, now they're coming under canister fire. Before they can ever even get a shot off, they've probably lost a third of their men. It's that bad. And so the lead regiments just get annihilated, and they never come close. Garnett is right here. Garnett has to ride a horse, which all of the officers of the Confederate Army that were in this attack were ordered to go on foot, because you can imagine what a conspicuous target an officer on horseback is going to look to thousands of men behind a stone wall up here. And Garnett, though, he had been accused of cowardice before the Battle of Gettysburg and in previous engagements, I think, by Stonewall Jackson. And, of course, Jackson was killed 2 months earlier at Chancellorsville. They're never able to resolve that issue. Garnett had been, I think, kicked by a horse during the Gettysburg campaign, and so he couldn't walk. And so there's this scene in the movie Gettysburg, whether it happened or not, I don't know, where General Armistead comes up to General Pickett and he says, order Dick Garnett not to make this charge. He can't walk. But Pickett says, how can I do that? I can't order him not to make the charge. And so Garnett was killed. His body was never recovered. He was probably killed in such a way as to not be recognizable on the field. Pickett's other brigade commanders are Kemper, who is thought to be mortally wounded. He's shot in the abdomen. He was a politician, ends up Speaker of the House of Representatives in Virginia at one point. I think he ends up the governor of Virginia after the war, but he survives miraculously. He's the only one of Pickett's brigade commanders who does survive the battle. Armistead is the only brigade who actually breaks through the Union lines briefly. And the reason why is because they're in the back. They're not on the front lines. And so as Garnett and Kemper's brigades take all the casualties, Armistead's coming up behind them. And so they're able to actually break through the wall briefly. And you can actually see, when you go to Gettysburg, there's a, let me see if I can find the monument. I don't know if it's on here or not on this map. But there's actually a monument for Armistead, and it's called the High Water Mark, where it shows where Armistead actually breaks through. I think it's right here. I believe this might be the monument. This is, I think, the monument here showing where Armistead was mortally wounded. Right there. It's a reminder, thank you. He was accused by Jackson after Kernstown. Okay. And Garnett had a brother who was, I think, the first Confederate general killed during the Civil War. Apart from death from battle, other causes of death, well, at Gettysburg specifically, there really wouldn't have been any other causes of death, but throughout the war, there's a ton of people who die from disease all throughout the war. 2/3 of the deaths happen because of disease. Why didn't Meade? We'll talk about the retreat here shortly. Who was Gibbon? Gibbon was a division commander in the 2nd Corps, who is actually in command of these men here on the left flank. It's Hayes right here. You've got Gibbon right here. And Gibbon was actually, he grew up in North Carolina and had several brothers in the Confederate Army that fought for the Confederacy. In fact, he faced some of his brothers on the battlefield at Fredericksburg. No, there weren't any black men at the Battle of Gettysburg. Not in the armies, anyway. So Armistead briefly breaks through, and here's kind of that little section here. You can actually see almost all of Pickett's division is Virginia. These are all Virginia troops. In Pickett's division, I think of the 13 regiments, 12 of the 13 regimental commanders are killed or wounded during the battle, during Pickett's charge. You've got these troops here who were just brutalized on day one of the battle, and now they're attacking again. And one of the things that happens is you have Stannard's brigade right here, and then you have the 8th Ohio up on the north side. I don't know if you can see it. Here they are right here. They fold in on either side. And one of the things that just devastates the Confederate lines, in addition to all the fire they face on their front, is this enfilade fire, this flanking fire that comes in from either side, from the 8th Ohio and from the Vermont boys in Stannard's brigade, folding in on either side and firing into their flanks. It was just brutal fire that they faced. And so the attack fails, and they start to fall back, and the Union men start chanting, Fredericksburg, Fredericksburg, because they had been on the other end of that. It was the 2nd Corps who were one of the main corps attacking up Marye's Heights at Fredericksburg. And so now they're on the other end of this, and so they're reminding the Confederates, this is what it's like. This is what you did to us at Fredericksburg, at the stone wall at Marye's Heights. Confederates did have Native Americans in the war. In fact, Stand Watie was a Confederate general. He was Native American, and he was, I think, the last Confederate general to surrender. Michael, thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, World War II would be the first, at least for the U.S. Army, World War II was the first war that the United States was involved in where more people died from battle wounds than from disease. Even in World War I, there were more deaths from disease than from battle wounds. Nicholas, thank you. Would I play a video game that portrays this battle? I have played several on my gaming channel. And so, yeah, the 8th Ohio is right here. Siddharth, it's right here, this skirmish line, just north of Trimble's division. What did Nebulous say? Could Lee have used Pickett's charge elsewhere and gotten gained ground? Well, originally the plan was for Pickett to attack the Union left and not the center. But when the attack failed on Culp's Hill early in the morning, he changed his mind and decided to attack the center. So that's that. But this is not the only fighting that's going on during this time. So while all of this is going on at Pickett's charge, Jeb Stuart has finally arrived in the evening of July 2nd, the night before, with his Confederate cavalry. And so Lee sends Stuart to go out and around the Union lines. And some people think that this is disputed, but some people think the plan was for Stuart to ride around and actually attack the center, but I think it's probably more likely that he's going after the Union supply lines. Right here, the Baltimore Pike is where the Union supply line is. And so Stuart is probably going around to try. This lake wasn't there, I don't think, at this time. That's a man-made lake. He's trying to hit the Baltimore Pike to hit the Union supply lines. And he's intercepted then by Union cavalry. So let's talk about that for a second. And this is one of the places where George Armstrong Custer is going to make a name for himself. Custer is a brigade commander at this point. Young guy. He graduated early from West Point in the class of 61. And he's a second lieutenant in 1861, right out of West Point. By 63, he is a brigade commander. He was promoted from a staff officer all the way up to brigade command pretty much instantly. And so he leads this really bold charge at Gettysburg. And Custer's brigade has some of the only repeating rifles at the Battle of Gettysburg. He's got 2 Michigan regiments that have Spencer repeating rifles at this battle. And so there's that cavalry charge that takes place. And this all takes place about 5 miles west or east of Gettysburg. It's what they call the East Cavalry Field. Let me see if I can find where that is. So here it is right here. This is where the cavalry battle takes place. And there's some monuments there. There's not a lot, but there are a few monuments here. There's this kind of little road that you can drive that shows you a little bit of what happened with the cavalry battlefield. Anthony Minimum, thank you for the donation. From Oversimplified to any other channel, who was more accurate to the Battle of Gettysburg? I don't know that Oversimplified talks a lot about Gettysburg. And honestly, I haven't watched that many other YouTube channels about the Civil War, just because it's a topic I already know so much about. I feel like there's probably not a lot that I would learn that I didn't already know, and so I tend to watch YouTube channels, videos about eras of history I don't know a lot about. So unfortunately, I can't really give a good answer to that. Maybe some of the folks in the chat can answer that and talk about their own experiences with YouTube channels and who they feel does a good job of talking about Gettysburg. Let me catch up on the chat. Spencer's were some of the first repeating rifles, so you could fire multiple shots without having to reload, which was a brand new thing at this point. Am I interested in Irish history? Very, because I have a lot of Irish roots. Where the Louisiana Tigers fought on the 3rd. If they fought, it would have been... I don't know that they did fight on the 3rd, because they were up... they would have been up in this area right here. They were in the 3rd Corps. So I don't think they were involved. They were in Iverson. No, were they in Iverson's brigade? I think they were in Iverson's brigade. Reminder, thank you. Appreciate that. American Battlefield Trust is an excellent resource for anything about the American Revolution, the American Civil War, the War of 1812. And they're also a fantastic organization as a whole because their mission is to preserve these battlefield sites for future generations and preserve the history of them. So I cannot recommend them to you enough, for sure. Thank you. I appreciate that, Ozai. Repeating as in you could fire, I think 7 shots without having to reload. Yeah, there were definitely elite units at Gettysburg. Braden, thank you so much. I hope you do the same. Hope you guys are all, if you celebrate the 4th of July, if you're an American. If not, then happy Treason Day, we ungrateful colonials, as the UK might say. But wherever you're at, whatever you're doing, I hope you guys are having a great weekend. My family and I are going on vacation on Monday afternoon. We're going to be going up to New England. We're going to Boston. I'm definitely going to be shooting some historic site videos for you. I'm going to Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain's house and his grave. So I'm excited about that in Brunswick, Maine. So might be a little bit of a slowdown in reaction content during the week. I'm trying to film a few videos ahead of time so you guys still get daily content, but I'll keep you updated on what's going on with that. So the Union had more men at Gettysburg by about 20,000. Okay, so the cavalry fight takes place over on the west. Sorry, I'm bouncing between a lot of different maps here. The cavalry fight takes place. The Confederates are driven off there. But there's another cavalry fight that happens, and it's actually the last combat of the Battle of Gettysburg takes place on what is called the South Cavalry Field. I thought I had a map pulled up to show you this. Let me close some of these that I don't need anymore. So let me see if I can find you something about the South Cavalry Field here. I thought I had that. Let me take a look. So no, I guess I don't have a map of it, but there's this attack that takes place, and I can read a little bit about it for you. After hearing news of the day's victory, Brigadier General Hugh Judson Kilpatrick launched a cavalry attack against infantry positions of Longstreet's corps southwest of Big Round Top. So that's down here. He's attacking the Confederate right. These are the men that attacked Little Round Top. So you're talking Law's Brigade, Robertson's Brigade, that area. Elon Farnsworth protested against the futility of such a move. He told him it was stupid, it was pointless, it didn't need to happen, but he obeyed his orders. He leads this charge. The Confederates throw back the Union cavalry attack. Farnsworth is killed during the attack, and yeah, suffered some pretty significant losses in the process. I thought I had a map of that. Let me see if I can find it to show you exactly what happened there, because nobody talks about this. This is not something that gets talked about a lot. What happened to Chamberlain's brother Tom? By Gettysburg, he's an officer. He lives to the end of the war. I don't know a lot about what happened to him afterward. So here you can see it's Wesley Merritt and Elon Farnsworth's brigades that attack these Georgians. The Bushman Farm, this is about the area where General Hood was wounded the day before during the July 2nd fighting. And so Evander Law, you can see here, these are the men that attacked Little Round Top. So they're there, and 1st West Virginia, 1st Vermont, 5th New York, 18th Pennsylvania, these are all cavalry regiments here. And that's thrown back with heavy losses, and that's the last fighting, real fighting between organized bodies of men at the Battle of Gettysburg. So then afterwards, Lee makes the decision to retreat. And I'll pull up a map to kind of talk about that. It rains pretty heavily on the 4th of July. The 4th of July is also the day that the Union takes possession of the city of Vicksburg, Mississippi, which basically completes the Union conquest of the Vicksburg or of the Mississippi River and opens up the Mississippi to the Union, effectively cutting the Confederacy in two, which is part of the Anaconda plan that they had from the beginning. And to me, honestly, that was a more important event than what happened at Gettysburg. But at this point, the war is effectively over. It's just a matter of finishing off the Confederacy. So Lee retreats kind of back the way he came, back down toward Chambersburg, but then turns southwest here. And he tries to go back behind the mountains to kind of stay behind that. Has to cross the Potomac, but the Potomac River's starting to flood, which is a big issue. I think Dorsey Pender, is it Dorsey Pender or is it Pettigrew that get killed? I think both of them end up. I think Pettigrew was mortally wounded during Pickett's charge. No, it was Falling Water, so it's on the retreat that Pettigrew is killed, is mortally wounded. Dorsey Pender dies the next day after that. So he had been mortally wounded at Gettysburg but didn't die until the 18th. So those were two significant losses for the Confederates. Yeah, thank you guys so much. Because I'm doing so much kind of talking and looking at this, I'm not seeing all the chat. So thank you to everybody who are helping to answer questions that I'm not catching. I appreciate that. So yeah, here's the thing. And Lincoln's really upset that Meade doesn't pursue Lee more aggressively and destroy his army. But you got to remember, both sides were devastated by what happened at Gettysburg. They both lost a third of their force. And Meade had only, by the time the battle's over, Meade has still only been in command of the Army of the Potomac for a week. He needs time to kind of organize and figure things out. They've lost a lot of commanding officers. They've lost a lot of men. They've got to regroup themselves. And so it's an understandable thing. So let me ask you guys real quick, and don't look it up. I just want to kind of give you a quiz. Of the 7 corps in the Union Army, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 5th, 6th, 11th, and 12th, which corps do you think lost the most men during the Battle of Gettysburg? And I'll ask you the same thing about the Confederate side. Longstreet's 1st Corps, Ewell's 2nd Corps, Hill's 3rd Corps. Which corps do you think lost the most men? Because we're going to look at the casualties in just a second. But throw out your answers to me, who you think lost the most casualties on each side. And I'll give you a minute because I know there's a bit of a delay. Yeah, Meade commanded the Army of the Potomac till the end of the war. He did die in 1872. Sixth Corps suffered the fewest casualties on the Union side. See, if you were to just ask me based on what happened during the battle, I would probably say Longstreet's Corps lost the most men, but it wasn't. And on the Union side, it was the 1st Corps. On the Confederate side, it was the 3rd Corps who lost the most men. Because remember, they're not only involved in the first day, but then they're also involved on the 3rd day. But I would have thought Longstreet. But no, it's the Union 1st Corps and the Confederate 3rd Corps who lose the most. The Confederates only had 3 corps. So let's take a look at the casualties. And then we're going to talk about some of the medals of honor from the battle. So here are the casualty estimates. You can see here, by far, the Union 1st Corps suffers the most casualties. And these are all on the first day of the battle. The Union 1st Corps are the unsung heroes of this battle. They held most of the day on July 1st. They fought more and fought harder than any other unit during the Battle of Gettysburg. And as a corps, suffered over 50% casualties. Just incredible, the losses that they suffered. So the next highest on the Union side is the 2nd Corps. That's Hancock's Corps. Fought on July 2nd, fought on July 3rd. Sickles after that. You can see the 6th Corps, 242 men. They were the ones, like I said, that were least engaged. After that, the 12th Corps, who held Culp's Hill. They didn't suffer a lot of casualties because the fighting they were involved in, they were so well entrenched up on Culp's Hill. Yeah, Ozai, absolutely. People do not realize just how brutal the fighting was on July 1st. And then, same thing, 3rd Corps, which is the unit that fought against the 1st Corps on the first day of the battle. They suffer by far the most casualties during the Battle of Gettysburg on the Confederate side. 1st Corps after that. That was Longstreet's Corps. Each of the Union Corps had around 12,000 men in them, so that gives you kind of an estimate. Each of the Confederate Corps had a little more than 20,000 men. I have been to Westlake, yes, many times. All right, so let's talk a little bit about, here are a list of all the Medal of Honor recipients. The Battle of Gettysburg, there were 64 Medals of Honor given out for the battle. Now, you have to remember that the criteria for receiving the Medal of Honor was different during the Civil War than it is today. In fact, at the time, it didn't even have to have taken place during combat. They gave a Medal of Honor to a woman named Mary Walker, who was a doctor, just for her heroism in terms of treating Union soldiers. They reevaluated the criteria for the Medal of Honor in the 1890s and actually took away 3,000 Medals of Honor from the American Civil War. But they also gave out a lot in the 1890s. And you're going to find that a lot of these Medals of Honor that were given for Gettysburg are given out in the 1890s. In fact, some of them late in the 1890s. Yes, the 1st Corps, Nathan, I believe Gettysburg is the final battle in which the 1st Corps operates as an independent unit. I think it was merged into other units after that. Eventually the same thing happened with the 2nd Corps, and I think maybe the 3rd Corps as well. Yeah, Confederate divisions were typically larger. Brigades were typically larger. Even their regiments were typically larger at Gettysburg. So we'll talk about some of the highlights, some of the stories that I'm aware of. Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, probably the most famous Medal of Honor story from Gettysburg. His Medal of Honor was awarded 30 years after the fact for the defense of Little Round Top. For daring heroism and great tenacity in holding his position on Little Round Top against repeated assaults and carrying the advanced position on Great Round Top, which would be Big Round Top. I have not been to Crocker Park, no. Do I think if Stonewall Jackson was alive, the Confederates would have won? No. I think the Union just would have fallen back from Gettysburg, fought somewhere else, and still won. But yeah, you'll see a lot of these. Capture of the flag. Capturing a flag was an automatic Medal of Honor during the Civil War. Let's talk about a few other. Alonzo Cushing, his Medal of Honor was given out November 6th, 2014. It was awarded by Barack Obama, and there's a video on YouTube of Alonzo Cushing's Medal of Honor ceremony. Long overdue. This dude deserved his Medal of Honor way more than Chamberlain did. Alonzo Cushing was a battery commander, Battery A, 4th U.S. Artillery. He was right at the center of the Union position during Gettysburg. Let me see. I closed all my maps of that area of Pickett's charge. I still have this one right here. So here's Cushing's battery right there. In fact, if we go back and look at the battlefield map, I can actually show you right where Cushing's battery was because I'll recognize the spot. This is what happens when you've been to Gettysburg like 15 times. So right there, oh, there, it's actually marked. Right where Armistead was mortally wounded is where Alonzo Cushing was killed. So he commands this battery right at the center. This copse of trees right here was the point that was pointed to as the center of the attack. This is where everybody was aiming for. So when most of Cushing's battery, most of his men had retreated, and Cushing had been wounded multiple times, he continued to man the batteries. And as the Confederates got right up here to the stone wall, he's firing canister shot pretty much by himself. And he eventually is shot in the face and killed. But incredible bravery by Alonzo Cushing, a young guy. He was 22 when he was killed, yeah. And he had a brother who, if I remember right, was pretty famous as well. I'm trying to remember his brother's story. Here we go. Was it William? Oh, yeah. His brother William is best known for sinking the CSS Albemarle during a nighttime raid for which he received the thanks of Congress. He was actually the younger brother of Alonzo Cushing. And so he's a naval... in fact, it says, as a result, the Cushing family is the only family in American history to have a member buried in more than one of the U.S. service academies. So Alonzo's buried at West Point, and William is buried at the Naval Academy Cemetery, which is pretty cool. Yeah, I know some about the Texas Revolution, but we're not talking about that right now. All right, let me catch up on the chat here. You challenge me to an Empire Total War rematch. We'll get there. All right, let's talk about a few other stories here. Here's a cool one here. Luigi Palma di Cesnola, an Italian, receiving the Medal of Honor with the 4th New York Cavalry. That was actually during the campaign leading up to Gettysburg. Richard Enderlin's a cool story. So let me read it to you first. First of all, Enderlin's like the bugler for the 73rd Ohio, and they're up on Cemetery Hill. And... let me read this to you, and then I'll tell you the story behind it. Voluntarily took a rifle and served as a soldier in the ranks. Remember, he's a bugler. During the first and second days of the battle. Voluntarily and at his own imminent peril, went into the enemy's lines at night and under a sharp fire rescued a wounded comrade. That wounded comrade that he rescued was Private George Nixon. George Nixon, unfortunately, died of his wounds. He's buried at the Gettysburg Battlefield Cemetery. George Nixon, the man he rescued that day, is the great-grandfather of U.S. President Richard Nixon. Was killed at the Battle of Gettysburg with the 73rd Ohio. Did Colville get the Medal of Honor? No, and he absolutely should have. If Chamberlain got one, then Colville should have gotten one. I think the issue was that Colville wasn't nearly as good at tooting his own horn as Chamberlain was. All right, let's talk about a few others. I'm trying to look and see what other stories I'm familiar with. A lot of these are just captures of the flag. And you can see a lot of them are lower ranking officers. Here's another bugler with an artillery unit. A lot of these are given out for the defense on Pickett's charge. You can see how many of these are July 3rd. Dan Sickles, of course, we all know his story. I've talked a lot about his story. He was court-martialed for his actions on July 2nd. Was also given the Medal of Honor for his actions on July 2nd. Alexander Webb, brigade commander during Pickett's charge. Defending the position. His brigade was right at the center of the attack at Pickett's charge. What's this? Oh, that's just Culp's Hill again. And so those are, I'm not too familiar with a lot of these other ones, but this is a whole Wikipedia page right here with all the medals of honor that were given out for the Battle of Gettysburg. And you can see here the Medal of Honor, which is very easy to confuse with the GAR medal. Let me show you what I mean. The GAR, the Grand Army of the Potomac, was like the VFW, the Veterans of Foreign Wars. It was a fraternal organization for men who had been in the Union Army during the war. So here's a GAR medal, and you can see what I mean. It's a star with a flag and an eagle, and you can see how close that is to a Medal of Honor. The main difference is that the flag's on top and the eagle and the cannon are right here. You flip the two of those, and you've basically got a Civil War Medal of Honor. You can see how so close it is, the two. Hey, M1 Abrams, what's going on? Strong Vincent, I agree, should also have gotten the Medal of Honor. If they're giving them out like they did, like candy, those are men who definitely should have gotten one. No, there's no variations, Frail. The Medal of Honor is the Medal of Honor. We don't have different grades of it. We just have different medals. And so we have Distinguished Service Cross, which would be like right below the Medal of Honor. We've got the Silver Star. There's a Bronze Star. There's a lot of different levels of medals for valor. But the Medal of Honor is the highest one and takes the most scrutiny and usually takes the most time to award. Any remains in the field at Gettysburg? Yes, most likely there are still, especially Confederates, who are probably buried on the field that have not been found yet, because by and large they had pretty good records of where everybody was buried, but occasionally they still stumble across some. In the U.S. military, it's the Medal of Honor in all the branches of the military. No, if I'm the Confederates, I absolutely would not have armed slaves. That's just a recipe for disaster for them. So that's about all I have about the Battle of Gettysburg. If you guys have any more questions relating to any of that, go ahead and throw those out there and we'll wrap it up. Make sure you check out my streams from the first and second days as well. Yeah, they're little, I think oak leaf clusters or something like that, that are placed on a medal if you win it more than once, get it more than once. And there have been several multiple Medal of Honor winners, including, I think, George Custer's brother received 2 Medals of Honor. I think he was one of them, Tom Custer, who was killed at Little Bighorn, which I'm planning to visit later this year if I get the chance. So Thomas Custer's in the 21st Ohio Volunteer Infantry and then later in the 6th Michigan. He's a 2-time recipient of the Medal of Honor during the American Civil War. So let's see. So one was May 11th, 1863. The other was April 6th, 1865. What PA division? There weren't too many divisions that were all PA troops. In fact, I think there might have only been one, the Pennsylvania Reserves. They found some in 96. That doesn't surprise me. I would love to do a ghost tour at Gettysburg sometime. Stonewall Jackson or Grant? I'd take Grant over Jackson. I don't think Jackson was as nearly a great a general as people give him credit for, and I think Grant was a better general than most people give him credit for. What other areas of history am I interested in? I'm interested in a lot of areas of history. My biggest interest after the Civil War would probably be either World War I or British medieval history. I don't have a master's in history. Bachelor's, yes. Master's, no. All right, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up, guys. Let's continue the conversation over on Discord. We have a U.S. Civil War channel on the Discord server, and we'll continue the conversation there. Thanks for watching, guys, and thanks to everybody who donated.